Welcome to Kaleidoscope, where we are positive, daring, different. Today, let's take a walk in the most talked about private garden in Sri Lanka, Brief by Baylis Bawa. This was the Baylis family's rubber plantation, and being a horticulturalist and landscaper, Baylis put his talents to good use. The garden came into being in 1929, and guess who has visited? Vivian Leigh, Sir Laurence Olivier, Peter Finch, and Queen Ingrid of Denmark. Later on in the show is a savior of blue whales, a hopeful voice for the economy, and a trilingual take on conflict. To our fantastic partners on the show, Srilanka Life, CDB, and The Daily Morning, you truly are amazing. Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, if you like our show, do subscribe and follow.
You can now start a CDB iDeposit digital fixed deposit and experience a range of special benefits from CDB.
This is CDB Snapshot and a quick look at the week that was. Sri Lanka earns $219 million from 143,000 tourists in July. Sri Lanka lifts import bans on trucks and heavy-duty vehicles for the first time since March 2020. Parliament approves the formation of laws to ensure that bilateral and multilateral agreements with Sri Lanka cannot be voided unilaterally. Lankan athletes Ayomal Akalanka and Nipun Pehesara win silver and bronze at the Commonwealth Youth Games. Maui's wildfires become America's deadliest in more than a century, with probably hundreds dead and over 2,000 homes destroyed. UNESCO decides against putting the Great Barrier Reef to its list of sites in danger this year. The annual dog surfing championships were held in San Francisco, and the winners were judged on the length of the ride and surfing style.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Trilingual Life.
Welcome to Srilanka Life News Capsule. Here on the show, we've been keeping track of Sri Lanka's IMF commitments and whether we've been keeping our promises. As at end June, we had fulfilled 33 commitments but failed 8. But here's the thing. Sri Lanka's history points to a high risk of failure in reform implementation, and there are still glaring issues that we need to resolve. So, how do we prioritize? Chairman of Empower Capital, Jehan Ismail, is in the studio today with some optimism. Jehan, welcome to the show after a couple of years, I think.
Nice to be here, Savi.
Sri Lanka hasn't done too badly in implementing the IMF commitments in the last 2 months. However, now comes the hardest part, because what is the likelihood that Sri Lanka will stay on track given that those IMF commitments are now becoming challenging?
Savi, what I think is, because President Ranil Wickremesinghe has gone so far in doing so many different things and so many things happening at the same time. For example, on the fiscal side, we've started widening the tax nets. On the monetary side, obviously, you've seen inflation has been brought down inflation is down, the exchange rate has sort of stabilized. So you see things are happening. As we all know, the DDO and the DDR programs, the domestic debt optimization, etc., has started taking place. We got Suresh Shah and his group trying to do the SOE restructures and things like that. So lots of action is taking place. You can see that the president has also tried to engage all our foreign neighbors and other foreign, obviously, nations as well, because it's very important. We can't do this on our own. Sri Lanka needs all the help we can get. Because of that, this is not going to fall off the rails. This will go on. This is very different to any time that we have had in history.
What are the weakest areas in implementation?
The fiscal consolidation part, the raising of taxes, is still very weak. Although it's improved, it is weak, and that's going to take a long time to enforced because there is no tax discipline in the country yet. People don't think of tax as something which is a must. The second one is the social net, right? It's very easy for you and me to sit here and talk about macroeconomics, but what about the person on the street? I mean, prices are so high, we got persistently high inflation, so difficult to bring down. Although the numbers look good, that is relative numbers. The actual price of things, as you and I know, is through the roof. If that doesn't get sorted out, then what happens is, those are the people who are easily influenced when the next election comes. Then what they do is they're easily swayed, and they'll bring the same sort of people into power, and we have the same cycles going all over again. So that social net and has to be really, I mean, there's got to be real concrete plans to help the less privileged people in the country. And also perhaps the image that Sri Lanka portrays to the world, because people, it's still, I mean, if you see a passport which is accepted only in about 48 countries, whereas it should be accepted to around in 120 to 150 just for business travel, means that we are still, for want of a better word, a bit of a pariah nation when the world looks at us. So I think the president is doing some sort of a job to get that sorted out, but it's going to take, that's going to be a long haul as well.
And now for our market sketch. The All Share Price Index moved down by 3.5% this week, while daily turnover levels remained above 2 billion rupees. WTI oil dropped below $81 per barrel this week as the Chinese economy struggled and the US dollar strengthened. Gold moved down to $1,900 per ounce levels as US bond yield remained high. Srilanka Life opens its 31st planet-friendly green branch in Jayala. The 5-story building contributes its excess electricity to the national grid from its solar power system, minimizes the consumption of electricity from the national grid, has a 100% wastewater recycling system, a rainwater harvesting facility, and a sewerage treatment plant. The Vegan Horse Riding Championship in Finland has 1,500 competitors who gallop on their feet and perform stunts and tricks. Dr. Asha Divos is truly a superstar. A globally acclaimed marine biologist, she's been studying the largest animal on the planet, and thanks to Asha's research, the International Whaling Commission designated the Sri Lankan blue whale a species that is non-migratory, as a species in urgent need of conservation as well. Asha was named amongst BBC's 100 Women in 2018. Sea Hero of the Year in 2020 by Scuba Diving magazine, is a TED Senior Fellow, National Geographic's Emerging Explorer, a Pew Fellow in Marine Conservation, a Duke University Global Fellow, selected as a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum, and is the founder and director of the non-profit Ocean Swell. She is also the first and only Sri Lankan to gain a PhD in marine mammal research, and just recently was named Equality and Diversity Champion by the British Ecological Society. We are truly thrilled to have on Kaleidoscope's Let's Talk today ocean educator, Sri Lankan marine biologist and pioneer of blue whale research in the northern Indian Ocean, Asha Divos. Let me go back to your childhood. You were 6 when you started poring over Nat Geo magazines and discovering things that no one else did. Well, you've done that. How did your fascination with marine life start?
I would see the ocean every day going to school, and I think it piqued my interest. Couple that with my curiosity about nature in general. We had caterpillars and scorpions in jars in our bedroom, and we were just like wild children. We grew up in the garden. My parents really encouraged that and curiosity, and then I became a swimmer, and for me just like water became my element. So I think all of those things kind of came together, and just like the vision of the ocean, I would see this massive blue tank of water, but I knew that if we could lift the lid, there was something magical inside, and so that's kind of like, it drew me in.
Why did you hone in on the blue whale?
I happened to get myself onto a vessel that was circumnavigating the globe and stopping in Sri Lanka. So long story short, I managed to get on board, and we were actually studying the sperm whales around Sri Lanka. And this one day we were off the southeast coast, like off Kirinda, and we were looking for these sperm whales that were tracking. And I was out there like searching on top of the water because we had microphones in the water to listen to them, but we had to see them by sight. And I was looking everywhere and didn't see anything, getting really frustrated. Shift is coming to an end. I'm like, now I want to see and I want to like get this, be that person and all of that, because I knew there was a big group, big pod. And then in the distance I saw a giant, spout, massive, powerful blow, and I knew it was some kind of huge animal with massive lungs. So then we went, and it was not one blue whale, there were 6 blue whales there, and that to me I was blown away. That was my first encounter, and I was thinking, wow, Sri Lanka, we have blue whales, and that was just a big thing for me.
What are the most recent findings you've unearthed?
So I've broadened from just being a blue whale scientist, which is where it all began. We work on sperm whales, so we have we're still in the process of like discovering things as well, right? As you can imagine, there's always a next step. So we have these squid beaks from sperm whale poop that can tell us what particular species of squid the sperm whales are feeding on, of culprit here. So that's that next step, find a good microscope, sit and do that. But apart from that, we've done the first ever deep sea research in Sri Lanka. So really pioneering work. We did it last year. We've been uncovering, there's all these species. I can't even tell you what they are because they're not published yet. But I can tell you we found a type of squid that we know is the prey of sperm whales in other parts of the world. But what I can say is there's at least 2 species of shark, at least 2 species of rays. There's all these different kinds of fish that in our history we have never seen before, and they were just off our coastline in deep waters.
How many species of whale are there around Sri Lanka?
Altogether, large whales, there's about 5 species. And what's exciting about that is that, we think about the blue whale and the sperm whale. There's another species called the Bridie's whale. And then, a few years ago, maybe 8 years ago, I discovered this species that was new to our waters, right? And the reason it's really, so we knew it lived in Madagascar and in Japan, but we didn't know it lived around our coastline. And so it was really exciting because it's an animal called the Omura's whale that can grow to about 30 feet, right? And it's right there on our coastline, and we were overlooking it, right? Assuming it was the Bridie's whale. So my point is that if we are overlooking giants that can get that big, imagine all the other smaller things that we are not seeing or not recording, right? Which just goes to show that our waters, there's so much left to discover, and it's teeming with life.
You helped to designate the Sri Lankan blue whale as a species in need of conservation. What is actually killing these whales?
So out in Sri Lanka, one of the biggest threats that they face is ship strike. The problem is that those shipping lanes are on an area that's very good for feeding for these for whales, right? Not just blue whales, even Bridie's whales feed in these particular areas where the slope of the ocean flow is very gradual. So you get really like nutrient rich water coming up, and that makes it very productive. So these animals rely on this area. So as a result, when you overlap the shipping lanes with good feeding grounds, there is vessel strike.
What would a book look like if it was created with words of conflict? The A to Z of conflict is somewhat like a trilingual dictionary, with artists revealing the complexities of language as a uniting or divisive force. Here's Shamini Pereira, founder and director of Raking Leaves, on her latest project.
The A to Z of conflict begins with a very simple concept. It imagines what a commonplace children's ABC book would look like if all the entries were chosen in relation to words about conflict and words born out of conflict. The project uses English, Sinhala and Tamil and is therefore a trilingual artist book involving 10 contemporary artists. The A to Z of conflict looks at the ways language defines us not only linguistically but socially and politically. Up close, it reveals how the complex workings of language have the potential to conjoin and divide us. Each copy, in fact, of the A to Z of conflict is bound in one of 6 combinations, reflecting how 3 languages can be positioned without giving one language greater status over the other. Drawing on the history of language conflict in Sri Lanka, the A to Z of conflict serves, I hope, as a collective means to think about how language rights, exclusion, status, and planning might serve us better in the future than they have in the past.
So, we'll catch you next week. Stay safe.